Here in London, Sir Keir Starmer has said that Britain is back on the world stage as he unveiled a new deal with the EU alongside senior European officials at a summit. The agreement, aimed at resetting relations with EU after Brexit, was hailed by the head of the European Council as a new chapter. Antonio Costa also describing the UK and the EU as neighbours, allies, partners and friends. While European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said today's agreement sent out a message to the world that in Europe we stick together. Let's take a look at what this agreement includes. There's a 12-year deal around fishing access for EU boats in UK waters. Confirmation there will be no increase in the amount of fish that EU vessels can catch. Some routine checks on animal and plant food products will be removed completely. That will allow goods to flow freely again, including between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. British tourists will be able to use more passport e-gates in Europe as well, and also agreement to cooperate further on a youth experience scheme that could see young people able to work and travel freely in Europe once again. There'll also be a new security and defence partnership. Watching it all for us unfold today from central London, where the summit has been held, is my colleague Rajini Vajanathan. Rajini.
Yeah, the proceedings now have wrapped up, Lucy, here at Lancaster House in central London. But make no mistake, whether you are pro or anti-Brexit, today has been a symbolic and an historic one. A number of deals, as you outlined there, that have been signed between the EU and the UK. And Sir Keir Starmer, in a news conference, taking questions afterwards, he was asked, is this backsliding away from Brexit, that kind of thing. Well, he said, no, this is all about moving forward. He used language that really was, in some ways, repetitive, but sending a similar message out. He's saying, we're moving forward, not backwards. He said, this is a new era. This is turning a page. And most of all, he said that Britain was back on the world stage, highlighting the fact, of course, that it's only been a few weeks since the UK signed an agreement on trade with the US and, of course, before that, with India. Despite some criticism from opposition parties, Sir Keir Starmer said this was a good agreement today for all sides.
Today we have struck this landmark deal with the EU, a new partnership between an independent Britain and our allies in Europe. This is the first UK-EU summit. It marks a new era in our relationship. And this deal is a win-win. It delivers what the British public voted for last year. It gives us unprecedented access to the EU market, the best of any country outside of the EU or EFTA.
Well, as the Prime Minister and the UK government have been saying even before all of these deals were agreed and announced, to them this marks a reset moment for relations between the EU and the UK. And make no mistake, this does bring the EU and the UK closer together with these cooperation agreements, although it doesn't tear up much of the principles and agreements of Brexit. Well, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the EU Commission, said this was a new beginning for old friends. Let's have a listen to what she had to say at that news conference.
What we have agreed today is historic. It will make a real difference to people in the UK and across our union. But the message we are sending to the world today is equally, if not more important. It is a message that at a time of global instability, and when our continent faces the greatest threat it has for generations, we in Europe stick together.
Ursula von der Leyen there. Well, we are getting some reaction from across the political spectrum. We've had some reaction from the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch. Shortly after those announcements, Ms Badenoch said she was gobsmacked by the series of deals that the Prime Minister signed. She said the deal on fishing, that we'll go into a bit more detail with my colleague Henry Zeffman in a moment, was a sellout. And she said that that has taken the UK back to square one. We should be using opportunities of leaving the European Union and not taking steps back. Now, she did welcome some news, though. She welcomed the news on e-gates when it comes to passports. So that now will give Britain's access to a separate lane now rather than the non-EU lane when they go overseas to Europe. And also there was some movement on pet passports, but she said she had concerns about what the UK had given away in concessions. Well, let's discuss a bit more about what we heard today and what was agreed today in the building behind us with our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman. Of course, this is a big moment, whichever way you look at it. But if we look back to Brexit 2016 and then, of course, 2020, when agreements were finally made for a UK post-Brexit, there was a lot of politics, a lot of emotion. How much of that existing deal has in reality been ripped up?
Well, the fundamentals of the UK's post-Brexit relationship with the EU are unchanged. Some of the earliest debates post-Brexit, and ultimately actually they were settled by Theresa May, not Boris Johnson, were would the UK remain part of the single market, yes or no? And the answer was no. Would the UK remain part of the customs union, yes or no? And the answer to that was no as well. Keir Starmer is not altering those fundamentals. But what he is doing within those parameters is trying to move much closer to the European Union. That is openly what he is trying to achieve here. The big ticket items today which amount to that growing closeness are about the UK following the same agricultural rules as the EU. That's designed to make it easier to import agricultural goods from the UK to the EU. And also that extension of fishing quotas, fishing rights for European vessels in UK waters for 12 years. That might prove quite controversial. Those are two fairly technical elements, but ultimately, as we learnt during the Brexit negotiation years, the post-Brexit relationship between the UK and the EU amounts to an accumulation of small technical details, which overall add up to a really important sense of what the relationship is.
OK, Henry Zeffman, thank you very much for your assessment of the events here today. Well, there's plenty more analysis on the BBC News website. And if you want to go through in detail all of the different agreements on defence, security, fishing and food and more, you can find all of that on the BBC News website. And, of course, analysis from colleagues such as Henry Zeffman. That's it for the moment.
Regina, see you shortly.